Tasting God's goodness. Anybody here like food? Can almost pick you out. No. I don't like food. Moving right along, before I dig myself in any deeper here. David wrote an amazing psalm here that I really want to get into without too much more unnecessary preliminaries. But this is an awesome psalm. I want to read it. I'm going to read it from the NIV. I'm sorry, ESV, not NIV. I'm usually in the NIV. And just follow along. I think it'll be up on the screen in the correct version. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones. Not one of them is broken. Affliction may slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. So just a few words of introduction. First of all, if you wanted to put a label on this psalm, it's a psalm of praise. I will bless the Lord. That's the personal. Remember we talked about the word blessing as opposed to praise. Blessing is more personal. It's more about gratitude. But it's also an element of praise. Testimony. David is just he's just spouting off about how God has saved him, how God has been merciful to him and been kind to him and is faithful to him. But there's also an element in here of teaching. Well, and we'll show the section of this psalm that it's actually very much like the Proverbs. It gives us kind of black and white. If you live this way, this is what will happen. This is how the world that God has made works. If you sow, you will reap. And so there's an element of teaching or even warning in this psalm. If you were listening carefully and you were thinking back to last week's sermon, I preached on messianic psalms, psalms that really like prelude or preview the cross. They're signposts leading to the cross. And there's one verse in this psalm that I just read that really reminds us of the cross. And that is verse 20. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. That kind of fits right in the psalm here. Why is that even there? Well, the New Testament writers picked up on that, and especially John in John 19. Because Jesus on the cross, they broke the legs of both of the men who were crucified on either side of him, but they never broke Jesus' legs. So the psalmist or the New Testament gospel writers said, you know what? The Old Testament talks about that. Finally, those of you that are into word games, this is an acrostic psalm. Any of you ever play with acrostics? Or crossword puzzles? This is an acrostic psalm. There are 22 verses in this psalm. Each one starts with the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet and 22 verses in Psalm 34. The best example I can give you of another acrostic psalm is Psalm 119. And if you look in your Bibles, more than likely, you'll even be able to see the Hebrew letters spelled out for you, in case you've ever wondered what the Hebrew alphabet looks like. So let's get into this. How is David, what does he want us to know here? First thing he shares with us is his praise. The first 3 verses are all about David's praise or blessing of God. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. So it's unending praise. David had, you know how Paul tells us to pray without ceasing? David would say, praise without ceasing. He would say that there should be something welling up in your heart. If you are aware of what God has done for you, it's going to be like a spring in you that just keeps flowing. I don't want to guilt you if you don't feel that, because we get distracted by life and we get, our emotions get up and down. But if you've lost that sense of praise, if you lost that sense of gratitude in your daily life, it's kind of a litmus test, really, that maybe you need to just be quiet for a while and let life slow down. Let yourself slow down so you can regain where you need to be with the Lord and with yourself. In verse 2, I see something I kind of like to call humble boasting. It's kind of a misnomer, but my soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. So he's talking to the humble, and he's saying, there's something you can be proud of. If you're a humble person, if you are of low circumstances, if life has dealt you a tough life, if your life you feel like you've been unlucky, whatever that means, or you feel like life has been cruel to you, if you're poor, if you're downtrodden, as he says at the end of the psalm, if you're brokenhearted, you can be glad. The song we sang this morning, let the weak say I am strong, let the poor say I'm weak, that's a revolutionary idea. It's one that we kind of have adopted as a culture. We always say God loves the underdog, don't we? You understand that that's a radical idea in the world today. Because in the world we live in today, it's the winners that are supposed to get all the prizes. all the attention, all the money, all the strokes. And that actually goes back to the ancient world. It's like, well, if you're in charge, then you deserve certain privileges. And people who are beneath you, your slave, your wife, your children, people who are beneath you in your social station aren't deserving of even your attention. You should just ignore them. Let them fend for themselves. That's how the ancient world looked at misfortune, at being brokenhearted, at being poor. And the Bible, starting in the Old Testament and then especially when Christ came, turned all of that upside down. So David can talk about boasting about the God who lifts up those that are at the bottom, who lifts them up and exalts them and elevates them. My favorite verse is verse 3. That's really where we get the title of my sermon today. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. So it's an invitation. He's saying to the people reading the psalm, you know what? You don't have to just be an observer. You don't have to just be a spectator. You can actually participate. Join me in magnifying the Lord. Join in. Later on, he says, taste. Experience what God is like. We're going to talk more about that before the end here. There's a quality in this psalm that welcomes you in. It says, you know what? This is not just for me. This is not just for people who already know all about God, who understand his love and his faithfulness. This is for anyone. It's open to all. The second section of this psalm is all about David's deliverance. This is where he says, first he says, I bless you, Lord. I praise you. Now he tells us why. I sought the Lord and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Verse 6. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. So there's this element of God has saved me. God has delivered me. And in David's case, it was not just this spiritual transformation that we would, Baptists would call salvation, the new birth. David's not talking about the new birth here. He's talking about a literal deliverance that came to him from God. If you read the superscription over this psalm, this is about when David was in enemy territory. He was living in a foreign country, and the king got suspicious of him. This foreign king, David was being hunted by Saul, so he had to leave the country. He's next door in a foreign country, and the king says, I wonder about this David. I think he might be a spy. He might be out to no good. He may not intend good for us. And David did something very shrewd. He pretended to be crazy. It says he let his spittle run down on his beard. He drooled. You ever been around somebody that drools uncontrollably? It's kind of a turnoff, isn't it? The king Abimelech, he basically said, oh, he's just crazy. I don't even want to be around him. So God used David's own quirky sense of dramatic to deliver him out of that situation. But David did see it as God's deliverance. So what does God deliver him from? From fear. You imagine you're in a foreign country, the king is sharpening his sword and looking at you askance, looking at you like, I wonder about him. You know that you have no power. If the king decides you're going to go, you're going to go. And I don't mean just leave. I mean head cut off, executed. You and everybody with you. David had a lot to lose. I'm going to share something real personal right now. When I got married in 1989, I was scared to death. I was 36 years old. I was over my head. I didn't know what I was getting into. I was scared to death. And I don't know why that would be, because I married this amazing lady, this amazing woman. She didn't scare me. The whole idea of the commitment, though, the whole idea of everything that went with marriage frightened me. That's why I waited till I was 36, for heaven's sake. In my wedding ring, in this band, it's worn a little bit. I might have to get it re-engraved. Psalm 34, verses 3 through 4. That's the reference. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. And that was God's promise for me as I stepped into marriage. And he's proven himself faithful again and again, hasn't he, hon? Not that I've always been, the perfect, faithful man I should be, but God is faithful. God also delivered David from shame. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame. So when in David's time, being ashamed was really tied to just life is out of control. I don't know what's going to happen next, there's a stigma that's attached to failure, isn't there? There's a stigma that's attached to not being in good graces with those around you. David was in a hard place. Can you imagine having to fake that you're insane just to survive? That had to be embarrassing. That had to be humbling for him. And yet he can say about God, and in relationship to God, my face is never covered in shame. Even though I had to pretend to be insane to get out of that predicament, I am not going to be ashamed, because that's how God helped me get out of it. Verse 6, I love. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Was David poor? Well, he sure didn't end up poor. We don't know at this point in his life if he was poor monetarily, economically. But we know that he was poor when it came to his attitude toward God. And when I say poor, I don't mean he had a poor self-image. I don't mean that he thought himself to be a worm. He just knew that he could not figure out on his own a way out of his predicament. To be poor is simply to say, I am needy. I don't have what I need to deal with what I'm going through right now. And what I want to say to you folks as you're in a church, okay, this is a Christian worship service. The world all around us is telling us today, you have everything you need. You are all you need to be, just as you are. You don't need God. You don't need anybody else but yourself. You just need to look in the mirror, think right, and you can figure it out. Have you heard that? I hear it all the time. David was smart enough to call himself poor. He was smart enough to acknowledge his own poverty before God and in the situation he was in. I need help. I can't figure this out. Lord, help me. That's being poor. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they will see God." The greatest barrier in our lives between us and God is basically our own pride, where we say, "You know what? I've got this." I have talked to more alcoholics, and that's the main thing they believe with all their heart. I've got this. I can quit this anytime I want. I'm not addicted. I'm not in trouble. He was a poor man because he was in a fix and he knew it and he knew he needed help. And he was smart enough to ask for it and to humble himself and come to God. Verse 7 is just kind of, I wonder if this has something to do with the cross stick thing, but the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. It reminds me of the story from Elijah, where Elijah is out and he and his servant are in a little cottage, and it's out in the country, and they look out and the army of Syria has totally surrounded. Here's two men with an army surrounding them. And his servant freaks out. His servant says, we're toast. There's no way we're going to get out of this alive. And basically, Elijah does this. Let's have some breakfast. And the guy says, what's with you? Why aren't you freaking out? Elijah says, those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. And he asked the Lord to open his servant's eyes. And his servant looks out again and he sees the army lined up all around them. And in the hills surrounding the whole valley, this whole huge amphitheater is surrounded by this massive heavenly army with flaming chariots. He was given eyes to see the reality. I don't want to get off on a tangent about angels here. God is in charge of his angels. God is in charge of his servants. But I believe there are angels. And I believe they surround us. I believe that in a real way we are protected by God's heavenly host. Some people believe this, by the way, this verse teaches guardian angels. I'm not sure I see that. I kind of question that. But I do believe there's a literal element to an angelic presence. Verses 8 to 14 are all about David's advice. This is the teaching section. Okay. And if I could, I want you to see the big picture here of what David shares with these people. First, he says, in verse 8, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." So there's the first admonition. Taste. Don't just observe. Don't stand back passively. Don't sit on your hands. Put your hand out there and grab some and pull it in and put it to your lips and actually taste it. I've met many people in my life who, and I think, I'll just be candid, there were some people there at the funeral for my cousin yesterday, and I think they were in the camp of, we're going to talk about God here today, and I don't know what to do with that. It freaks me out. God freaks me out. Religion freaks me out. Church people freak me out. When we were in northern Minnesota, there was 4 bars in the town and 4 churches. And the church people freaked out about the bar people, and the bar people freaked out about the church people. And they never the twain shall meet. You know, they all just, they talked to each other, but they never showed up at each other's places. You know, I know in Great Britain it's different. You know, the bar is a pub. It's a public place. You do everything there pretty much. It's a social place. But boy, freak out about religion and religious people? We're just too good. Now, I could never be good enough for God. You ever heard that? I'd have to change so many things in my life, I wouldn't even know where to start. Or God would not be interested in me. He's high and holy, and I'm just an average Joe. I've heard that. I've sensed that from people. It's never going to happen for me. It's never going to happen for me. And all that we're encouraged to do, that first step is just to reach out and taste. Just to reach out and say, yes, I'm willing to take a baby step of faith. I'm willing to open my mind and my heart and my eyes to that God might actually love me, might actually notice me, might actually care for me. He might have a solution to where I'm at in my life. Taste. Second step is fear. Fear of the Lord, you his saints. For those who fear him have no lack. Now, a lot of people, a lot of non-believers don't understand that. They don't understand what all of us that have gone to Sunday school understand, that you know, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and we all know that, right? A lot of people don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about fear. We're not talking about cowering, waiting for God to hit us over the head, seeing God as a power monger. I see God as my Father. But I had the advantage of growing up in a day when seeing God as your Father that really helped you understand something about God. I think a lot of people today, if they grew up under a father who is harsh or controlling or just, you know, all out evil, and there are people around like that, stumble over the idea of God as a father. But I grew up with a dad who loved me, but he also had a temper. Didn't my dad have a temper, Gary? You maybe didn't see it. You maybe didn't ever see it, but boy, I saw it. There was an element of respect for my dad. There was an element of, I better not cross him, because he ultimately is in charge of me. You know the old saying? I made you, I can unmake you. Well, think about it. Who can really say that to us? Our Heavenly Father can say that to us. I made you. I can unmake you. So there's an element of, wow, God is large and in charge. But guess what? He's also full of compassion and kindness and great grace. And abounding in loving kindness. So the first advice he gives us is to taste, to fear the Lord. Then he says, listen. Come, my children, listen to me. And I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Really, that verse is in the center of this section. So it's really the main point that David wants to get across here. If you're willing to listen, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to be teachable, that makes all the difference. He uses two more words. Verses 12 to 13, I would summarize as keep. Restrain yourself. There is an element in faith where we need to take charge and say, okay, God is in control of my life, but I also have some things I need to do. I need to change some things in my life. God, give me the grace to change those things. Keep your ears, your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. There's some areas in my life where I need to say no to myself. And finally, he says, turn. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Seek shalom. Seek peace. Repent. Turn. Do an about face. Turn 180 degrees and say, you know what? I'm not going to be about that kind of thinking anymore. I'm not going to be about that kind of living anymore. David spends the last part of the psalm just summarizing some major points, and I'm going to be very quick with this. First of all, there's an emphasis on contrasting destinies. Part of his teaching here is he says, you know, there is more than one way to go in life. You can follow your own instincts and your own inclinations and follow the popular crowd. You can follow, whatever the way the wind is blowing, I'm going to go that way. And you're going to end up in trouble. You're going to end up destroyed. There are consequences for turning your back on God. And by the way, I don't always think that God is sitting out there waiting for us to mess up and then chop. He just cuts us off. I just believe that's the way he's made the world. The world works. Ultimately, it works out for us when we trust the Lord, when we value what he values. And there's two sections there that deal with those destinies. The second thing I see here is that God is a God of the brokenhearted. Verses 17 and 18. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirits. And that goes right back to what I said earlier about being poor. Don't believe the lie out there that if you trust God, if you pray the right prayer, if you go to church, if you put money in the offering plate, then you've got God in your hip pocket. He'll give you whatever you want if you just say the magic words. There's an element in the world that says, name it and claim it. And I want to speak against that here. That when we think that God owes me something because I said the magic words, or I've served him all my life, he owes me something. God doesn't owe us anything. But if we come to him in humility, come to him in faith, come to him broken and admit our brokenness, admit our need for him, He's right there. He's always right there, ready to embrace us and bring us in. The final thing I want to say is that David talks about being bruised but not broken. Verse 19, many are the afflictions of the righteous. I don't see a lot of health and wealth there, by the way. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Life is bumpy. We have a family joke now, quoting our 3-year-old granddaughter, when she heard she got to go on a hayride in a big hay wagon pulled by a tractor. Look out! Are you ready? There's going to be bumps. And that's life, isn't it? Are you ready? There's going to be bumps. There's going to be bumps. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. But the very next verse says, he keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. We're bruised, but we're not broken. God is faithful to us. He will not let our faces be covered with shame. There is no promise that we will avoid trouble. Our family, and I think I can say this pretty confidently, our extended family, and I'm not taking pride in this. I'm not trying to say we're anything special. But we were blessed to have a matriarch in our family. Annie Daggett. Annie Ebengay Daggett. I knew her when she was in her 90s. She was a powerful woman. She could be a controlling woman. When she had an opinion, you knew what it was, but you know what? She had a heart for God. She prayed for her children and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren and her great-great-grandchildren to the day she died. And the fruit of her prayers is that not every single one, but most people, most of my cousins have a vital faith in Jesus Christ, have a walk with God that is real. And they've really sought to pass that on to their kids. That doesn't, there's no guarantees that our kids are going to do what kids are going to do. They're going to make their decisions. I know some of you are brokenhearted about that. But we sang at my cousin's funeral yesterday, "Great is thy faithfulness." And the first thing that popped into my head as we were singing is I'm looking in the back at my 6'8" son holding his 3-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking about their bedtime routine that he's been doing now for 2 years at least with our granddaughter. Every night he goes in to her bedroom and they have some time together, a quiet time where they pray and talk, and they always sing, or he always sings to her, "Great is thy faithfulness." And I think about that hymn, and I think about not just the hymn, but the rock that God has been and the faithful source that God has been to our family. And I just want to say to all of you, taste. Give it a taste. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus promises us rest twice in that passage. I will give you rest. You will find rest. And a lot of us are so busy, we don't even stop to think what God is offering us all the time. And even believers can get way too far ahead of God in our craziness, in our busyness. But one of the things I would offer you if you don't know Christ, or if you just kind of lost your way somehow, that's what God offers you. Rest for the weary.